Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. If you're new around here on my channel, my name is Harmon. Today's video, I'm documenting the really unfortunate, tragic case of a 13-year-old girl named Hana Williams who died here in Sedro-Wooley, Washington. And in this video, I'm going to document all the details about this case, which are incredibly tragic. Really one of those cases that actually hit me pretty hard, actually. And not many cases do that, but this one in particular really rattled me and hit me hard. I'm going to show you her grave here in Sedro-Wooley. Now, Sedro-Wooley, Washington is about an hour and a half north of Seattle. So Hana Grace Rose Williams was born in Ethiopia. She was Ethiopian, and she was born there on June 19th, 1997. And she passed away here in Sedro-Wooley on May 12th, 2011. Again, she was 13 years old, but she was adopted by a couple named Larry and Carrie Williams. And the Williams actually had a total of 9 children. 7 were of their own children, and then they adopted 2 other children from Ethiopia. And one of those adopted kids was Hana. So Emmanuel, the other child that they adopted from Ethiopia, was actually deaf. Anyway, so the Williams, they ran their household as a very devout, fundamentalist Christian household. They didn't really allow the children to watch TV, have the internet, or really even socialize with any other kids. They kind of kept to themselves. They wouldn't really let their children go out of the house very often, and they wouldn't really let them hang out with any of their friends. But when they did go out on occasion on walks, the neighbors described seeing the family, Larry and Carrie and the 7 children, kind of towards the front, but they would always see Emmanuel and Hana always in the back, like trailing far behind the rest of the family. They figured out that it's because Larry and Carrie absolutely hated Hana, and they really didn't like Emmanuel either. And so you always wonder, like, how could anyone treat their children that way, let alone, you know, their 2 adoptive children. You spent all that time, energy, and money to adopt these 2 children from Ethiopia, and yet you treat them like absolute garbage. It pisses me off, and it boggles my mind how anyone could do that. So reading different trial transcripts and court documents, I read that Hana's daily life consisted of punishments that continued to escalate every single day. So Larry and Carrie would punish her basically on a daily basis, and it would continue to just get worse and worse and worse. And so some of the punishments that I read included they would lock her in a barn by herself on the property. After that happened, they locked her in a dark, like, shower room in the actual house. And then lastly, they locked her in like a 4x2 closet for basically the last 6 months of her life before she ultimately died. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. It gets, unfortunately, a lot worse from there. On a different occasion, Larry and Carrie actually accused Hana of smearing her menstrual blood all over the bathroom. And so as a different punishment, they forced her to use the outhouse, which they set up outside far away from the house itself. But they didn't service the outhouse very often, like maybe once a year. And so this outhouse was absolutely disgusting. And so they forced her to use that outhouse on a daily basis instead of the normal bathroom that all the other children got to use in the house. They also wouldn't let her use the actual shower inside as well. And so they forced her to take a shower by using a hose out in the front yard. And so while all the other kids were inside being able to take showers, she was forced to stand out in the front yard and use a garden hose for her shower. They also wouldn't speak to Hana sometimes for up to 2 or 3 days at a time. So while she was intermittently locked in, you know, the closet or the barn outside, They sometimes wouldn't talk to her for 2 to 3 days at a time. To kind of continue with the story, Larry and Carrie would also make Hana and Emmanuel eat different food than the rest of the 7 children. They would make them eat like cold leftovers, and also I guess they would make them sandwiches sometimes, but they would soak them intentionally in water. So literally every single aspect of Hana's life, in terms of bathing, using the bathroom, eating, where she had to sleep every night, all that was controlled by her parents, and it was obviously to the point of child abuse. So the actual events that led up to Hana's death took place on May 11th, 2011 into the early morning hours of May 12th, 2011, as her death date was considered May 12th, 2011. But anyway, on that late evening into the early morning hours of May 12th, Hana was again forced to be outside in the cold, rainy weather. She was severely underweight at that time, and she had bruises all over her body, including numerous lacerations from all the beatings that she endured by her parents while Hana was out in the dark in the backyard, freezing, barely alive basically at this point. Meanwhile, her mom, Carrie, and the 8 other siblings were looking through the window, peering out at her, just watching her suffer. So because of her extreme lack of nutrition, the fact that she was severely underweight, and because she was forced to be outside in the freezing cold, Hana had actually developed what's called hypothermic paradoxical undressing while staggering and thrashing around. Basically meaning that she was kind of becoming almost like delusional and was, just not in her right mind because of all that. And so she actually ended up undressing herself and thrashing around on the ground, actually ended up falling several times and hitting her head. And so she was, completely deteriorating by the hour. Hana had again fallen one last time face down into the mud. And at that point, her mom, Carrie, finally came out and was actually pissed at Hana because she was now naked in the backyard, face down. And so she ended up getting a bed sheet, and she asked her 2 teenage sons to help carry her body back into the house. She called her husband, Larry, who at that point was working at Boeing, and called 911 and told them that, "I think my daughter just killed herself. She's really rebellious." That is what Carrie told the 911 operator. So after several hours, finally Hana was brought to the hospital. However, she was pronounced dead there at the hospital. Hana's cause of death was determined to be hypothermia compounded by malnutrition and gastritis. What led to Larry and Carrie finally being arrested was an anonymous tip came in about 2 months later after Hana had passed away. And the anonymous tip told the police department that Carrie didn't like her adoptive children, and that Emmanuel was starting to be treated just like Hana had been. So finally, Larry and Carrie were arrested. They were brought to trial for Hana's murder. They were both convicted of manslaughter. Carrie ended up receiving a sentence of 37 years in prison, and her husband Larry received a sentence of 28 years in prison. The article also states that Larry and Carrie were also charged with assault, as again they were starting to do the same abuse towards Emmanuel, again the other boy that they adopted from Ethiopia. They were assaulting him. The remainder 8 children were adopted out and given to some relatives. It doesn't state specifically if they all went to one particular relative or if they all got kind of split up. This case, again, it really struck a nerve with me because, again, I was adopted, and just knowing that, Hana went through so much torture and physical and mental abuse from the people that adopted her and that were supposed to love her. That to me just really makes me upset. Once again, guys, if you're new around here, my name is Harmon. Go around the country filming different infamous crimes like this one. And so if you enjoy me going to the actual locations or going to the graves of all these victims, just make sure you hit subscribe. It's always free. Besides that, just want to say big thank you to anyone who watches my videos. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.